Welcome to another exciting episode of the Insurance Untangled podcast. This is Naren. I'm one of the co-hosts of this podcast, and we are dedicated to helping practices that are tangled up with insurance get untangled. That's why our podcast is called Insurance Untangled. We talk about topics that help you get more control and create a bigger and better future for you, your patients, and of course, your team members. Today, my guest is my friend and co-host, Ben Tuinei. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Naren. It's always great chatting with you on the podcast and outside of the podcast too.
Absolutely, Ben. It's always fun because I learn something, and I know our listeners learn a lot from you. So appreciate you taking the time to do this wonderful episode with us. We're going to be talking about how insurance deals with you when you go out of network. How insurance deals with you when you go out of network. This is an important topic because a lot of people don't know what that experience is going to be like. So having an expert like you, Ben, who has been doing this for decades now, makes a huge difference because you've seen, the good, the bad, the ugly, every detail in every nook and every corner. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting how insurance carriers deal with practices, and let's dive into it.
Absolutely. Let me start by asking you my first question. Can you explain what assignment of benefits is and the rules for assignment of benefits for in-network or out-of-network patients? So you need to explain all these terms: assignment of benefits, in-network patients, out-of-network patients.
Yes. So assignment of benefit, Naren, is if I, as a doctor, am going to accept the reimbursement on behalf of the patient from the patient's insurance, right? So essentially, the way this works is that when the patient comes in, I'm only collecting the estimated co-payment from the patient at the time of treatment, right? But the other half or the other portion of payment for that treatment will come to me as a doctor after I submit the claim to the patient's insurance. So that's what's called assignment of benefit, is reassigning the reimbursement from the patient to the doctor. And that way, the patients don't necessarily have to pay full fees when they go into the practice. So the other part of it is in-network versus out-of-network that you asked, right? When you're in-network, typically assignment of benefit comes with your contractual agreement with insurance, is that you agree to accept assignment of benefit, and then, of course, balance the patient's out-of-pocket based upon assignment of benefit, to where I'll assume reimbursement on behalf of the patient, right? So it's affordable for patients, in the sense that if a patient has a $1,500 treatment plan or a $2,000 treatment plan, insurance may pay $1,000 to $1,500, and then the patient pays the rest, right? So, typically under that particular example, the patient's only paying, $200 to $400 or $500, right? As an example. Some situations are paying more, but more or less, but I just use that as an example.
Right.
So this whole design behind assignment of benefit was primarily geared towards in-network agreements, right? To allow patients to not have to pay full fee at the time of treatment. So that's what that is.
So you're saying when you go out of network, now those payments are made directly to the patient, and then patient has to pay you the full amount.
Good question. Yep. So if you do go out of network, some insurance carriers continue to accept assignment of benefit. Others, like Delta Dental and Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, may choose to not accept the assignment of benefit, where they'll send reimbursement directly to the patient. So these are things that you have to know as part of your strategy towards going out of network, is you have to plan on how the practice is going to get paid, right? I see too many practices that drop Delta Dental and they continue to assume assignment of benefit, but Delta sends the reimbursement to the patient, right? Now, instead of you billing insurance, you have to track down the patient. And from the patient's perspective, and this is the number one feedback that I get from patients, is when they receive reimbursement directly, they legitimately feel that that's their money. So when the practice reaches out to them, they're like, well, I already paid you and I received my reimbursement, right? People don't do the math to quickly figure out that, oh, I owe this money to the dental practice. So there are challenges with practices not having the appropriate financial plan in place, chasing down patients that are never going to pay, right? So you have to know that going into out of network for any insurance plan, just so that you can prepare ahead what you want to do with your financial policy, collect in full or do the co-payments like you do under in-network terms.
Exactly. I think I know Gary talks about collecting payment at the time of service, and then of course, letting the patient know, we're going to charge your credit card, but before your credit card is due, within a couple of weeks, you should be paid. I mean, you should be receiving a check from the insurance company, so you're not going to be affected by it.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. In fact, I mean, if I were running a practice and we're transitioning out of network, that's exactly what I would do. I would not accept assignment of benefit. I would prepare my patients for that policy, right, where they'll be receiving reimbursement directly, because it just eliminates so many hassles for the practice from an insurance administrative perspective if they're not accepting assignment of benefit, and assuming liability if the insurance carrier doesn't pay, right? Because it's not a liability for the practice, but when the patients complain, they complain to the practice when the practice had nothing to do with that denial, right? Or all the other issues that we experience from being in network.
Exactly. Is it legal for insurance plans to not accept assignment of benefits unless you are in network?
So the unfortunate answer to that is yes. So decades ago, the federal government passed a law called the Leach-Bliley-Graham Act. And within that law, essentially, the government gives insurance carriers the authority to fully enforce HIPAA. If a practice is not in network, the insurance carrier has to assume HIPAA protection, right? Where they can't communicate any information to any outside parties. Even if the patient gives consent, the insurance companies, well, from my experience, at least, when the patient gives consent to release information to a dental practice, sometimes insurance carriers don't accept that, right? And they don't want to work in that angle. So the Leach-Bliley-Graham Act is what legally permits insurance carriers to ignore you unless, as a doctor, they can ignore you unless you're in network.
Thank you so much. So they can do this. They can not assign you the benefits when you're out of network. What is
Absolutely.
the motivation for insurance plans to not accept assignment of benefit out of network? The only thing I can think of is to hurt the practice. That's really, I mean, I'm being blunt here. That's kind of what I think is the motivation behind it.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's to penalize the practice. It's to penalize the patient. To me, it's insulting towards the patient, right? If the insurance plan refuses to work with the patient's doctor of choice, where there are out-of-network benefits, in a way, it's frustrating for patients because patients are not used to out-of-network, right? They're not used to accepting assignment of benefit. Patients don't know what to do if their claim gets denied, right? Or if they need additional documentation. So insurance carriers have designed this out-of-network policy for the very reason that you mentioned, to hurt the practice, to steer patients towards in-network as much as they can. But fortunately, Naren, with the wave of doctors leaving insurance contracts these days, we're starting to see dental plans like Delta Dental that traditionally don't accept assignment of benefit out of network. Well, rumor is that they've approved to accept assignment of benefit out of network in 30 plus states this year. And this is 2023.
Wow.
So that kind of tells you, even Blue Cross, we're starting to see Blue Cross in states where they don't accept assignment of benefit. Now they're sending checks to the patients directly, to the practices. And we're even seeing states like Iowa, as an example, that are passing laws that prohibit insurance carriers from not honoring the patient's election to give the practice HIPAA protection as it pertains to reimbursement, right, or claims payments. And so in Iowa, you can't, as an insurance plan, you can't refuse assignment of benefit, right? If the doctor and the patient request it, the state law says, well, the insurance carrier has to honor it. So we're seeing a shift in the dynamic, right? Where more and more insurance plans are accepting assignment of benefit out of network, just primarily because they have no choice. It's the way of the future. Practices are going out of network, and patients are staying in out-of-network practices, which kind of, I mean, it's a great thing to see, simply because, in my opinion, it's going to ease up some of the relationships that practices have had with insurance carriers from an out-of-network perspective leading into the future. Things are going to start to get better and better and better.
Yeah, I mean, as a person who's advocating for, not being dependent on insurance plans, I love this. I love the fact that 30 states are now saying, either the insurance companies on their own accord or because of the states pushing them to, saying we will, assign benefits even when you are out of network. That is brilliant because, think about it. Patients are not choosing a practice because they're in network. They're choosing a practice because the doctor is excellent. He has amazing Google reviews. He has a good reputation. So by doing that, you're still giving the patients the convenience of not having to deal with all these payments and whatnot. But at the same time, they're giving them the choice to go to the dentist who deserves their business, because that dentist has an excellent reputation, has an excellent online profile, and so forth. So I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, if I'm like, the legislator, or I'm like, like a impartial person looking at this situation, I think that's the right thing for the patient, because at the end of the day, the patients are the kings. I mean, they are the ones who should be at the center of this.
Absolutely. Yep. So public pressure is forcing things to change, which is good.
Right. What's the overall attitude of insurance plans towards out-of-network providers?
Traditionally, it's been an adversarial relationship where insurance companies, if you try to go out of network, they're going to try to make your life hell. They're going to send letters to your patients. Sometimes they'll even call your patients to steer them to go towards in-network. But a couple of things happened during the pandemic that's helped the cause of the clinical community. Number one, the fact that a lot of businesses are still understaffed, right? Even insurance carriers are having a hard time finding good talent. That combined with the fact that there's some massive trend and a wave of doctors dropping insurance carriers cannot keep up with that, right? They can't send letters out to all patients, right? They can't get ready for that fast enough when a doctor is choosing to go out of network. So now what you're seeing is that a lot of the prior adversarial components of the relationship between insurance and a doctor, when a doctor goes out of network, a lot of that has sort of settled down quite a bit to where we're seeing less insurance carriers sending letters to patients. We're seeing less hassles from an out-of-network perspective, from an admin perspective, less denials. I think the reason why that is, Naren, is because a lot of practices aren't accepting assignment of benefit out of network. So if the patient's claim gets denied and the patient is notified that, if the patient is taught to contact their HR department and that HR department calls the insurance company, it's a different response than if the dental office were to call the insurance company, right? Because as an HR department, I'm like, okay, we are paying you to manage
$1 million.
benefits.
Yeah, we're giving you $1 million check, and this is how you treat my people. Like, it's a different conversation. Everything shifts.
Yes. So naturally, when you have patients complaining to their own employers about how much their dental plan sucks and is not representing them properly, insurance carriers are finally receiving the frustration and the complaints that they should have been receiving.
Because the HR person is going to say, do you want my $1 million check next year or not? You decide.
Exactly. So
I don't care about all your explanations. I don't care about all your nonsense.
Exactly. So this is where the industry should have been 20, 30 years ago. But insurance carriers have done such a great job to shift the dynamic of where the complaints go, right?
Yeah.
So when a claim gets denied and patients need to pay more, the patients traditionally
think it's a doctor.
Yes. They're like, you crazy SOB, why didn't you cover my claim? Why, it's your fault, right?
Yeah.
But now that frustration is going straight, more so than before, is going straight to the insurance industry. Still going to the dental practice, but
so I'm just thinking out loud, and correct me if I'm wrong. So
you're good.
if I'm a doctor who's out of network versus I'm a doctor who's in network, the chance of me being bullied by the insurance company is less when I'm out of network, because the pressure that the HR is going to put on the insurance carriers.
Absolutely. Now it's a separation of church and state, right? Where the practice is the practice. It's clinical. And the insurance company is the insurance carrier, and it's their responsibility to now give you reimbursement as a patient, right?
Right.
And so so what you usually see is that if insurance carriers are paying patients directly, you do see far few denials, delay tactics, right? Because they don't want the patient to complain to their HR department or to their employer or directly to the insurance carrier. They don't want that. So that's a key.
And I think
if
I'm a dentist, or if you're coaching a dentist, you probably will tell them to educate the patient to directly go to the HR every single time there's an issue.
I would even have like a printout put in their
like
bag
put it
of
in your wall.
goods.
Your claim is denied. Talk to your HR.
Yep. Here's the phone number. Call them directly. It really changes the dynamic. So if this continues, Naren, where patients are complaining to who they need to be complaining to,
exactly,
you'll start to see more insurance carriers not pushing doctors around from both an in-network and out-of-network perspective.
Because the power is now equal. I mean, you are now employer against insurance versus this tiny dentist against this massive insurance company.
Exactly.
It's really like it's an equal power dynamic, which is what we want, as opposed to an unfair dynamic.
That's exactly right.
Have relationships improved between insurance and doctors from an out-of-network perspective? I mean, I guess you kind of touched on it already, but just what's your observation over the last few years?
Since the pandemic, the relationship dynamic has changed significantly, where we are seeing insurance carriers sort of bending policy, bending tradition to accommodate doctors. Doctors are getting more and more educated these days. And I think with the pandemic, that's created a lot of, study time for doctors to read and listen to podcasts and write books. The education on how to fight insurance has significantly increased in the last 3 years as well. So we're seeing more doctors engage in strategies, proven strategies to combat insurance, to put insurance carriers in their place. But from this whole trend of going out of network, what we're seeing is that the insurance carriers are most certainly playing a lot more. Well, they're playing fair because they're dealing with the patient now, right? The patient now, they run the risk of the patient complaining to them, which totally changed their attitude towards the doctors. Insurance carriers have no choice but to be nice now, and that is going to continue.
I think one of the key things that came out of the pandemic is a lot of people who were just on autopilot, suffering and living through nonsense, like being abused by the insurance carriers in a network situation. They said enough, because like pandemic taught a lot of us like what's important, what's not, what is the garbage you're going to put up with, what is the garbage we're not going to put up with. So I think like you said, it's the education and the time to reflect and think, like, do I really want to be abused and like more and more every year by these insurance companies, or I'm going to put my foot down and start fighting back? And I think that's starting to happen in the industry, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Big time change, very beneficial for the dental industry.
Right. This is my last question. What are some of the resources that are available if someone is trying to transition out of network with a particular PPO plan?
Absolutely. I'm a little biased because I love Gary, and I think the work that he does is seeing it firsthand on many, many occasions. I think he's one of the foremost people that I would recommend doing an interview with. So you can contact us, and we can share Gary's calendar with you if you're willing to. Well, if you're looking for a consultation on the potential of dropping out of insurance, but you can also check out Gary's website, thrivingdentist.com. And you'll find a lot of great resources, including other podcasts that Gary does along with Naren. Out-of-network resources on the podcast that Gary has, with especially the one with Naren. What's that one called? The I Love Dentistry.
It's less insurance dependence.
Less insurance dependence, or the I Love Dentistry Facebook community, right? Where I see a lot of posts on there on tips to go out of network that come from that team, but also doctors share their own experiences, which is something that's key and important to understand, or at least to see, is the encouragement that other doctors will give you as you go through this whole journey towards out of network. So check out Gary's website, thrivingdentist.com.
Absolutely. We'll put a link to his what he calls a coaching strategy meeting. So if you need his help in going out of network, we'll put a link. I think, Ben, you have a link that you can share. So we'll put that in the show notes so you can grab that and book a meeting. So I think that's a great resource. And the website that Ben was mentioning, which is a short form podcast called lessinsuranceDependence.com. And that's 18 minutes. I interview Gary, and pretty much he shares all kinds of tips, strategic, tactical, on like how to go out of network, how to make this a success. There are 250 episodes or close to it, so that you will have tons of education, all in your fingertips at no cost. So check those out. Ben, I learned so much. I didn't know a lot of the things you shared today till today. So I really appreciate you as always. You're just awesome and always giving and always knowledgeable. So I appreciate that. I also want to take a minute to thank our listeners. We can't do what we do without you. So if you love this particular episode, share it on social media, forward it to your friends, even subscribe to our podcast. So the next time we release an episode, you don't need to kind of go look for it. It just automatically downloads to your device. Of course, reviews help others find us. So please write a review for us either on iTunes or Google Play, your favorite podcast platform. Till we meet again, visit insuranceuntangled.com for all the resources and have an amazing week ahead. This is Naren, your co-host.